Yeah, I can also check it on my phone to make sure it's working.
Yeah, it'll probably be a bit of a delay, but I think we're live. Hello, everyone, if we are indeed live. I'm Sebastian from NaturalismNext. I write about philosophy, science, psychology, that sort of thing on Substack. Sometimes I make YouTube videos. And today I'm going to be hosting a discussion / debate between Lucas up here in the top right, who's actually the co-author of NaturalismNext. He hasn't posted on the Substack yet, but he has posted, on the older blogger form of the blog. And then Trey Jadlow, is that how you say your name?
Yeah, Jadlow. Uh-huh.
Trey Jadlow at the bottom. So I'm just hosting. I take kind of a hands-off approach to this, so I'm not going to interrupt unless absolutely necessary. Hopefully it won't be necessary. But this started based on sort of a Twitter discussion, and that's how we got here. I think it was about metaphysical necessity and modal logic and theism, stuff like that. I think we'll probably be talking mainly about the existence of God. But I figured I'd start with just some little introduction. So I'm going to have Trey go first and just brief introduction on yourself and who you are.
Yeah, my name is Trey Jadlow. I live in the Kansas City area. I'm 58 years old. I'm a born-again Christian of the Reformed Baptist persuasion. Been a Christian since I was 20, so that would be 38 years. Let's see. I like to think about things, and I like having conversations with people with whom I disagree, and I love the Socratic method. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. It's been very hard to find interlocutors as of late, and so I'm really grateful for Lucas agreeing to be with me. I'm sadly divorced. I've got 6 kids, ages 3 boys, 3 girls, ages 35 down to 21, and I've got 5 grandkids. Oh, I'm a dental technician. This is my lab here, and I work for myself, and I think that's about all I got.
All right, thanks, Trey. Lucas, go ahead.
Sorry, there we go. I'm Lucas. I'm an undergrad right now. I do philosophy and math at CU Boulder. That's kind of the main thing. I mean, I'm the co-author of NaturalismNext. I've contributed to like a handful of blog posts, normally about philosophy of religion, but now I kind of stay out of philosophy of religion, and I read a lot of philosophy of language and ethics. But
yeah, this will be the rare exception to Lucas staying out.
I know you roped me back in. I haven't read any philosophy of religion for like 2 years, and now I'm back in.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's it for the introduction. I think I'll let Trey start and just give his spiel, because I feel like that's kind of how the discussion started on Twitter. Mm-hmm. But then after that, I'm gonna, unless it's necessary for me to facilitate, I'll just let these two go back and forth. So yeah, Trey, if you want to start with like the general topics you wanted to go over.
Sure. And I'm very extemporaneous the way I do things. Before we begin, is it possible, Lucas, for you to tell me a little bit about your maybe your religious persuasion, or like where you're coming from? And I'd be happy to tell you mine as well.
Yeah, sure. I would say a decently confident atheist. I have like spiritual inclinations, I guess, but I get a lot of it out of reading, philosophy and literature. I don't find like religion particularly like fulfills that need for me. But yeah, so I guess like for the purposes of this conversation, like atheist is fine.
And were you raised in any type of Christian, or were you pretty much raised in a secular home?
I was raised in a pretty secular home. My dad, he was like a agnostic sort of Christian, and my mom is like an agnostic but pretty atheistic leaning Jew. So okay. I would say, yeah, pretty secular.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I was raised in a Christian home, but I didn't really understand what the religion until I was about 20 years old. So, and like I said, I'm a Reformed Baptist, so I'm a Baptist persuasion, and I like to. I'm very passionate about logic, and I think it's very important that people are logical, whether you're religious or not. And so, with that, I like to open up and ask for you if I might have 2 instrumental presuppositions as we engage in our encounter. I'm going to ask you to allow us to have logic or the law of non-contradiction as a means of discovery. Would you grant that to us here?
You just mean like, am I willing
rational coherence?
just grant the law of non-contradiction for the purpose
Yeah,
of
or
proposition.
laws of thought, law of identity, and law of excluded middle as well.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, and then would you also grant that we have the basic reliability of sense perception? Not saying perfect, but just so we have some connection to the world in which we live.
Sure.
Okay. I always ask for those things, and nobody's ever not granted them to me. But I think it's important to do that, because if we can't, grant logic, then we have no way of interacting with the information that we have. And if we cannot have basic reliability sense perception, we can't have. How do we get any data, any sensory data that we can have any trust with? So I always ask for that as my beginning point.
Yeah.
And so with that, you had said, I think somebody posted something about atheists not understanding necessary being or something, and then you said, like you would give $500 or something if you could describe the problem of modal collapse as a result, as it relates to necessary being. Is that what you're saying?
I think here I can read the exact tweet that this comes from.
Sure.
Some guy, let's see, Darwin to Jesus, posted a pie chart that was like, do atheists understand what a necessary being is? And it was like, no, but then, also no, but in yellow. So, atheists don't understand what a necessary being is. And this is a guy I've seen post a lot, and I think he has no idea what he's talking about. And so I was like, I will donate $500 to Capturing Christianity if you can explain basic modal semantics without AI. That's what I said. And then you jumped in and you were like, you did say you suspect that I'm repeating tropes that I don't really understand, and I was a little offended. Not gonna lie. So I was like, I'll talk to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, so can you tell me what problem you have with the idea of necessary being?
Like just with there being a necessary being.
Well, actually, let's do this. How do you justify the instantiation of contingent being non-contingently? In other words, this is one of the reasons why I asked for the law of non-contradiction. You agree that contingent being is, right?
How are you meaning contingent?
That which does not necessarily exist, that which changes, that which is, but does not have to be, that which is composite in nature. In other words, it's made up of act and potency. It has existence and essence that come together to make what it is.
Sure.
Let's say, just make it simple. You are a contingent being, right? You're not self-existent.
Yeah, but before we go further, sorry, you defined contingency with reference to necessity, but ordinarily those are two sort of two sides of the same coin. Normally you define necessity as not possible that not, or something like that. So are you talking about like logical necessity, or are you talking about necessity in terms of it's you're talking about logic?
Ontological and logical necessity.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure those are the same thing. Normally, like in the literature, they distinguish between metaphysical and logical necessity. But
yeah,
I'm happy to just, I guess, go forward with this, and then maybe if it pops up again, and I think it's like causing some sort of confusion, maybe I'll bring it up again.
Okay. So you agree that contingent being is, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. How do you justify it?
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking when you say, how do I justify, like, how do I know that there's contingent things?
No. How do you know? Would you agree that contingent being can be defined as an effect?
As an effect?
It can also have a causal relationship, like your parents are contingent beings that gave rise to you, right?
Sure.
But your parents themselves started out as an effect, and you can't have an infinite regress of effects without causes, because that violates the law of non-contradiction.
You can't have an infinite chain of causes effects without causes?
Yeah. In other words, it starts as an effect. Would you agree with that? Contingent being starts as an effect.
Sure, but why wouldn't you be able to have an infinite regress?
An infinite regress of effects without causes?
Well, okay. they could each have a cause, and it would be the thing in the series immediately prior to
Yes,
them.
but it begins with an effect, right?
It begins with an effect. Well, it doesn't have a beginning. It's an infinite regress.
Yes, but the every in this infinite regress, every single thing begins potentially before it's actual, right?
It begins potentially before it's actual.
In this infinite regress.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I'm happy to say it. Yes, it starts off as an effect that's produced by whatever's immediately prior to it in the series.
Right. And so if it begins out as being potentially something before it is actually something, to be potential is to be nothing. All right. Actual is to be actual.
Sure.
So if it begins as a potential, it requires self-creation. It would need to precede itself before it exists in order to make itself.
Well, it is caused by the thing before it. So it doesn't need to create itself because the thing prior to it creates it. And then that thing has something prior to it which creates it. You see what I'm saying?
It creates it ex nihilo, or you're just saying there's a chain of causal relationships where
Yes.
where the previous instrumentality brings about the composition of the or synthesis of the effect itself. But the entire thing, it's the predication, the foundation for it is effect, and therefore there is no real cause. There's no efficient cause. It's all instrumental. Do you know the difference between instrumental and efficient causes?
Um, no, I'm not sure what.
Okay, so are you familiar with Aristotle's fourfold causality?
Sure.
Okay, so under the efficient cause, because you got the material cause, the final cause, the material cause, and the efficient cause. But under the efficiency, there's going to be a subcategory of instrumental cause, and what that means, like your parents, in a sense. In one sense, they were efficient causes because they chose, to be able to create you. But in another sense, though, they themselves are not the ultimate cause of being because they are contingent. And therefore, they are, in an ultimate sense, they are instruments that brought about you, but they're not the ultimate reality that created you. And so you cannot have instrumental causality being the ultimate reality because, by definition, it is contingent.
I'm still not clear on how that rules out the possibility of an infinite regress of, as you're calling them, instrumental causes. Because, you imagine a situation like you have a population of like chickens, and you have one generation of chickens, and then prior to them you have another generation of chickens that begat that generation of chickens, and then that generation of chickens also has a generation of chickens behind it, right? And there's never a point where you have a generation of chickens that does not have a generation of chickens prior to it, which begat that generation, right?
But you're positing potentiality before actuality out of nothing.
But it's not out of nothing because there's always stuff prior. There's always actual stuff existing prior.
Okay, then you hold to the idea of a necessary being.
No, because each of the generations of chickens is not necessary. You see what I'm saying?
But they are potential before they're actual, which is nothing before they're something.
When you say they, are you referring to the entire series of chickens, like considered as an aggregate, or are you talking about a particular generation of chickens?
They are all contingent being. And if you want to say everything in the universe is contingent independently, you're saying it's contingent necessarily. And that's a violation of law of identity. It's not identity. I want to say, how can contingent being instantiate non-contingently? Non-contingently is another way of saying necessarily. All right. You can't have the contingent being exhibiting the qualities of necessary being without violating the law of identity. You're saying it's something that is the opposite of at the same time.
Right, but there's no contradiction because the series of chickens is a contingent thing. Every single member of it is a contingent thing. And, I guess there's possible worlds where none of the chickens exist at all. But in this world, the chicken world, there's an infinite regress of chickens, each of which does have a cause. You see what I'm saying?
Are they all contingent?
They are all contingent.
So they are dependent independently, right?
I don't know what that means. When you say they're dependent,
you're violating the law of identity. You're saying contingent being is non-contingent. You're saying dependent being is independent.
Okay, so it feels like there's been a switch in the language that we're using, where initially we talked about contingency as relating to metaphysical necessity, metaphysical possibility, where presumably contingency meant something like not necessary, but also not necessarily non-existent, right? So it's basically just possible, but not necessary. But now you seem to be conflating it with like dependence, and I don't know what you mean by dependence, because
That's what contingent means. It's
not on the definition that we agreed on at the beginning.
That that you're saying that contingent being can be self-existent or independent.
I'm not saying it can be self-existent, but I'm saying
there's only two kinds of being. There's either dependent being or independent being.
And how are you using those terms?
Contingent and necessary.
Okay, you see the problem.
Unless there's a tertium. Is there a third category you have?
You see the problem I'm running into, though, is we've agreed on a definition of contingency, right? And then you're saying, oh, if it's contingent, that means it's dependent, and then it being dependent has all of these other consequences. But then I ask you what being dependent means, and you say it means contingent. But according to the definition of contingent we agreed on, there's no reason why it should entail any of the stuff you said it should entail.
Okay, right? So you say contingent can be independent.
I'm saying I don't know what you mean by independent, because you just define it as contingent.
Okay, so we got contingent and necessary. We got dependent and independent being. I am equating those two, and I need you to show me how I'm equivocating there.
What I'm saying is I don't know how you mean dependent and independent. Like, pretend contingent and necessary are categories that we don't know about, right? And I'm just asking you to explain to me, what is something that is independent? What does that mean? Like,
it's not dependent on anything in order to exist, and it also cannot change, and it also cannot be material, because matter itself, by definition, is limited or is limited by space. So it's contingent on space. So it cannot. So it's got to be immaterial. It's got to be simple in its nature, because anything that's complex requires a composer. All right. And so a necessary being is that which cannot change by definition, because if it changes, then it's an effect in itself, and it cannot be cause ultimately or necessary.
Okay, so your definition of dependence is like something is dependent if, in order to exist, there must be something else that exists which causes it to exist.
Yes. So in other words,
it has to be caused to exist by something else.
It has to move from potentiality to actuality. Like, I have the potential for being bald, and I'm actualizing it even as we speak right now. Okay. So I am moving to, I am reducing from the potentially being bald to actually being bald.
Okay.
And there's other things that are actualized that affect me. And also I'm a composite being, even, particles in part of my being in me that's also actualizing that. But to be able to change, it's got to be acted upon by something outside of itself that's already actualizes your potential into an actuality.
Okay, so, I'm happy to grant all of that, but then we still don't have a contradiction with the infinite regress.
Because you're saying that everything in the universe is dependent.
I'm saying that everything in this. Okay, what do you mean by dependent independently? I don't know what that means.
Well, you would say it's dependent being, right?
I would say every generation of chicken is dependent in the sense you said.
You're saying all of reality is dependent, right?
In this case, I'm still working within the chickens, because I want to know why an infinite regress in general is not possible, right? So
you can say chickens, but you're saying everything to it, and it's not. That's triply obvious.
I don't think I'm committed to that, right? So you're giving me an argument, right, with a series of premises, and independent of whatever my convictions are about the nature of reality, you've given me a premise that there cannot be an infinite regress, and that's what I'm attacking. Because if I can show that premise is wrong, well, then your argument is no longer sound, right?
Absolutely.
So regardless of what I think about the actual world, or whether there is some sort of necessary being, whatever, I feel like you should just grant me that we're talking about this one premise.
That's fine, and I'll grant you the chickens, but in your world, chickens are everything that exists. That's what you're describing.
In this world, sure. In the hypothetical world, the chicken world, yes, there's all that exists are just the chickens, sure.
Right. And they are all dependent, right, in their nature?
Yes, each chicken requires a chicken prior to it in order to cause that chicken to exist.
Okay, and to be potential is not to be actual. Would you agree with that? In other words, there's no ontological status to potentiality. They're only in actuality.
I guess I'm a little confused about the language you're using there, because I think potentiality or potential is itself an ontological status. You're normally cleaving between
It
things
is,
that
but
are actual and
it's
things that are
it's a
potential.
it's an idea that you have in your head as an actual being, but to be potential is not to be actual. In
I
other words, like you had the potentiality to exist, all right, and you could have been an
Okay,
idea. Let's say an idea in the mind of God. I'm not going to argue directly that, but yes, to have an
sure.
idea, or you could say like I just like that. I would say it's impossible for us to think about nothing because the idea that I have in my head of nothing is an idea of something. So that's why if there's something exists now, then something exists necessarily, or something exists eternally. Because if there is someone who is existing right now, I didn't always exist, and so something had to bring me into existence in order for me to be. And so what you're positing is zero, then something out of nothing.
There is no point where there is nothing. I'm saying for every single point,
No, yeah,
right?
you are. You're not
There for
realizing that.
every single point, there is something prior to it which causes it, right? Every single chicken,
Yes, it's
there's
a
a
cause.
chicken behind it.
It's an actual.
Yes, and
Every point has an actual.
sure.
Okay, it doesn't start, but you're not positing a beginning of an actual. You're beginning with a point of zero.
There is no beginning, right? That's the point.
No, no,
Okay,
can you track it though, logically?
can I track it? I mean,
You
it
can
might
keep
help to
going
give
and
an
keep going. Keep
example.
all we need is two examples, really, and you're just adding to the problem
No,
with
no,
this.
I mean not exactly. This might give you a better example of what I have in mind. Take like the set of integers, right? And take any integer in the set, right? And there's going to be infinite integers behind it. There's not
Mm-hmm.
going to be any integer in the set where there's nothing behind it. There's not a stopping point, right? There's always something behind.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
I'm
but
saying, why is that a contradiction?
those are mathematical properties that are not
Right,
ontological being.
right. But I'm saying
That
in
one
this
integer
case,
doesn't cause another integer, right?
in this case, though, you understand like perfectly well the idea of an infinite chain that has no beginning, right? And I'm
Sure.
saying, so in the case of the chickens, you have an infinite chain of generations of chickens, and for any single point on the chain, you can pick anywhere. You can go as far back as you want, right? Arbitrarily far. You're going to take a generation of chickens, and there's going to be something immediately
Yeah.
behind it, and that's another generation of chickens, right? And so you never have something that's coming out of nothing. There's always something actual that causes, it actualizes the potential of the next generation of chickens, right?
Uh, no, what you're doing is all you're doing is trying to make it more complex to make it more believable. All we need is two things, though. In other words, you can multiply it toward eternity.
Mm-hmm.
It still is irrational because it begins with zero. It begins with a
It, it
non-being and then being.
it doesn't begin with zero, right? I think that's the contention is that there is
What is?
no.
Then tell me what it is.
It's an infinitely
No, no,
regressing
no,
chain.
no. The the beginning of whatever that you're saying. In other words, let's not talk about time. Let's talk hierarchically.
Sure.
All right, you've got dependent being. Everything is dependent being. It cannot be dependent independently. It doesn't make sense. Are you the one that asked me about the philosopher guy, and you thought I didn't know who he was? I
No,
hadn't interacted with him. Alex Malpass. Do you know who Alex Malpass is?
I do know Alex Malpass. Yes.
Did you not mention him with me?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Well, I thought you were the one that I talked to because I don't talk to very many people anymore.
No.
Okay.
I mean,
Anyway,
it could have
most
been if you're talking about like
most
years ago, maybe. But not in the last few months.
okay. No, this is just like a few days ago.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that most philosophers now are granting the reality of necessary being, and they just want to say it's not personal though because it's logically necessary. That's what I'm saying. You cannot have an effect without a cause. All right. Did you know that the principle of causality is analytically necessarily true because the only way that you can define a cause is to invoke the reality of effect. The only way to talk about an effect is to invoke cause. All right.
Uh-huh.
And so when you want to say, well, I'm talking about ultimately an effect to be the hierarchical top of my eternal.
I am saying there
regret.
is no top. There is no top of the
I'm not.
hierarchy. The hierarchy goes on forever. So I'm at no point am I saying there's a top, which is an effect, but it was not caused or anything like that.
I'm
I'm
not.
saying there is no top to the hierarchy.
I'm not talking about logical or numerical.
I'm talking about chickens.
That's right. And
Yeah,
you're talking. No, you're talking about just general being, and you're using
sure.
chickens as an example.
Right.
And those chickens begin at not existing. In every single instance, it's zero from nothing.
It isn't zero because there's chickens there. All right, maybe we should move on from the infinite regress point,
Okay.
because I don't think this is going anywhere. But we can move on to, I don't know if you have like another premise. So it started off, you're saying, if there's contingent being, well, then there has to be something that causes that contingent being to exist, and it can't go on forever, right? That's about as far as we've gotten in the argument so far.
All right,
So let's go to the next step.
Okay, let's go on next to it. All right, so if something exists, I'm going to say there are only 4 possibilities.
Okay.
All right. Either it is an illusion.
All right.
It is self-created.
Yeah.
It is self-existent.
Uh-huh.
Or it's created by something that is self-existent. Okay. And if you don't mind, we'll go through each one of those briefly.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one is if something exists, it is an illusion. And in order for something to be an illusion, are you familiar with Descartes' cogito ergo sum?
Sure.
So he was trying to find certainty, and he wanted to find rational certainty whereby it cannot be doubted. And he said, if in fact I am doubting that I exist, I have to be thinking, and since I am thinking, therefore there must be some existence. And so therefore everything cannot be an illusion. You could be an illusion. This computer, I may be having a dream right now, and
Sure.
you may not be real. So in this old world around me, it could be a dream. But one thing that I know that I cannot escape is that I'm doubting the existence, therefore thinking, therefore I am. Okay. Now the second option is that which exists is self-created. And can you see what problem that might pose?
I assume you just want to say that's impossible because something can't cause itself, because it would have to be temporally prior to itself or something like that, right?
So it would need to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. That's why I asked for the law of non-contradiction.
Okay, I guess I'm happy to grant that too.
Yeah, and so the third one is that which exists is self-existent. And again, that which is self-existent is not dependent upon anything for its existence. And I, the inquirer, am here asking this question, and I know that if I was born, I know that I have to have food, I have to have oxygen in order to be. Therefore, I know that I am contingent. Therefore, I cannot be the ultimate reality. And then the final option is that which exists is created by something that is self-existent or necessary being.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is probably pedantic, but I'm not sure what you have in mind here. But presumably I wasn't created by something self-existent immediately. I was created by my parents. So do you just mean like eventually, kind of in the causal chain, there has to be something self-existent?
Yeah, so I'm going to say there has to be 2 types of being in the universe. There has to be, we know that contingent being exists, and through logical corollary, then there must be something somewhere that has this attribute of self-existence. Otherwise, nothing would be.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess one potential issue is, you've proven, maybe if I grant everything so far, I guess you've proven that there has to be something that's necessary, but you haven't proven that there's only one thing that's necessary, because so we can imagine there's kind of multiple causal chains going back to multiple like necessary entities. So you need some sort of premise in there that gets you from there being some sort of necessary thing to there being exactly one unique necessary thing, right?
Right. So if there are more than one ultimate realities, that this ultimate reality, this necessary being, cannot have accidental properties. Are you familiar with accidental properties?
Sure. Yeah.
So there are things that we participate in, but they do not actually define us. So, like, for example, for me, love is an accidental property. Sometimes I'm loving, sometimes I'm not, but I'm still Trey, whether I have that or not. So I participate in this. Ultimate reality cannot do that because there must be something, first of all, to justify the property that exists in which it's participating. And it makes it something that is changing. And anything that changes, again, as I stated earlier, cannot have this. It just cannot. It can't be necessary in nature. So what that means is that whatever is a necessary being, it must be the perfection of all that it is. And so, and everything that we see here, I'm a Christian Platonist. Everything that we see here must be an example of perfection to give it the being that it has. And are you familiar with the principle of proportionate causality?
Mm-hmm.
Something cannot cause something and something else what it itself does not possess. So this ultimate reality must be the perfection of everything that is, and everything that we see here. It must be the ground of that. Now, if you posit two of those ultimate realities, how are you going to distinguish the two from each other? The only way that you could distinguish them is to say that, well, this one has a property that this one does not have, or this one is a greater perfection or something of what it is, and therefore the other one would be contingent. It wouldn't be the ultimate reality. So, and the ultimate reality must be singular because it must be the perfection of all that is by way of immanentia, they say, of everything that we see here. And therefore, that's why polytheism doesn't work. And material gods don't work because matter impinges upon its being. In other words, confining it and making it.
Right. So I guess my reaction to that is I'm not a Thomist. I'm not committed to any sort of like scholastic metaphysics or, Aristotelian metaphysics or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think almost everything you just said relies on scholastic metaphysics. So for someone like me who's coming into this argument, and I just hear, you just talk about causation, necessity, contingency, right? Sure, I'm happy to grant all of that. But in order to, get out of the problem of there being multiple necessary things, I feel like you have to invoke all of these extra commitments that I don't really buy. So, I mean, I can grant your argument so far, but now I'm a polytheist or something else.
So you don't think that the ultimate reality has to be the perfection of all that there is?
No.
Okay, so they have accidental properties, your ultimate realities?
They have accidental properties.
That's the entailment of what you're saying.
Yeah, I suppose no. I suppose they don't have accidental properties.
Okay, then how do you distinguish the two from each other?
Because they could still just have different properties, but those are essential properties to them.
Okay, they're essential properties to them, but they're not essential properties to reality. So you've got something in back of them that gives them what they have.
I don't know what an essential property to reality means. I don't think reality.
Everything that we see here, Socrates would go around and say, "What is justice?" Given the right thing. And he goes, "No, what is it? What exactly is it?" And it's amazing the insights that the pre-Socratics and Socratics and Plato and Aristotle, to me, is amazing how those guys could come up with what they did. They had an amazing ability. And that's why St. Augustine in the Christian church, he was a Platonist before he was a Christian. He said the only philosophy that's worth studying is Platonism. He's a Neoplatonist because he said he got so much right that makes so much sense. But and they're the ones you said scholastic metaphysics, which was really just classical theism.
Sure. Okay.
It's Greek, in origin, and man, it's amazing how much they got right, in my view. But the ultimate reality must be the perfection of everything that there is. And it's got to be necessary in nature. It's the only thing that makes sense. And that's why, for example, like polytheism doesn't make sense to me. Islam does not make sense to me, of course, in the Trinity here, because there's no relationality within Allah. And if you're dependent upon your creation in order to have relationality, then you're contingent as well. That doesn't make any sense. So, in my view, Christianity is the only thing that makes any sense at all, and it's very compelling.
Right. Well, I can I could grant the premises of your argument, but I could give you an alternative explanation that's sort of out there in the literature. I'll be transparent that I haven't read this particular author's work in like a couple of years, so I
Okay.
don't know how great of a representation I'm going to give. But Graham Oppy is like a leading atheist philosopher, and his response to some arguments sort of in this vein is he's like, there can be like a necessary being, at the root of reality, or if you go far back enough in time, but it just need not be what theists say it is. So,
Well, it can't be time bound at all. It's got to be outside of time.
sure. So,
Time is
so
just a measurement of contingent being relating to itself or to each other.
okay, so that's another thing that I think is like controversial. That's
That's
a very
true. I'm not going
that's a
to be
very
dogmatic on
particular
that.
view of like
But
time.
I do believe it has to be outside of time. Now, what time is, of course, I'm not going to be dogmatic about that.
Yeah. I don't know, but if you follow the argument, you say any contingent thing, it has to sort of be an element of this causal chain, right? And this causal chain has to terminate eventually in some sort of necessary thing. Independent of the kind of scholastic stuff that you went into about perfection and all of that, which I don't know if I buy at all. You just get that there has to be something that's like kind of necessary at the root of things, or something necessary which like kind of put the causal chain into motion. And so Api, his response is, well, there could just be sort of a necessary like naturalistic initial state is kind of the phrasing that he uses. So it's a state of the universe where you kind of press go and then the rest of the universe just comes out of it, and that thing is necessary, and that can kind of accommodate all of the premises of your argument and still not lead me to theism.
No, you just said something needs to press it.
No,
And
no,
it, it,
I that was just a manner of speaking. Nothing
and
needs to press it. It's
there's no pressing go. There's no beginning because
there
it is
is,
necessary.
yes, sure,
And then,
absolutely.
so what do you mean by
It's I mean that's a hard question, but it's
Well,
of the
that's
same
what
sort of thing. Yeah,
he might be
it's
saying the same thing I'm saying. He just said like the word God.
no, he's definitely not. So broadly, I'm not sure what definition of natural Oppie opts for, but I would say in general the kind of natural that seems like relevant here is that it's the same sort of thing that we kind of talk about in the sciences, right?
You mean
I mean,
contingent being?
um,
It's a composite of being and act and potency. In other words, there
uh,
is a being to it, but it also is changing, and it has accidental properties and things acting upon it, and it's contingent.
it's of a similar
That's
type
that's how I
to those
define
sorts of
nature.
things. Yeah,
Nature is
but
contingent.
right. So this would just be a counterexample to your definition of natural, then,
That
right?
fails
Why? Why?
because it's contingent. You're saying it's
No,
it's a
I'm
necessary
saying it's
being that is
necessary, right?
contingent.
I'm not saying it's contingent. I'm saying it's necessary, but
Okay,
it's
so it's not natural as the way you're defining natural.
it's as the way you were defining natural. I don't see a reason to accept
Okay,
that.
what's your view of natural that overcomes that?
Um, I like I said, I don't have like a particular definition of natural in mind, but I
Okay,
think it's
you're just saying you don't like my answer, but you don't have a rebuttal.
yeah. I mean, no, I'm not saying I don't have a rebuttal. I'm saying I don't need to give you like a set of necessary and sufficient conditions for something
You
to be
asserted
natural.
it was natural, and I'm saying what is
Yeah.
natural?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure. No. That's reasonable. Yeah. So yeah. So do you agree that like the sort of things that scientists are studying are a kind of distinct domain of phenomenon from something like God, right? And that there's more differences between them than merely that God is necessary and the things of science are contingent. You also have things like the things in the sciences are generally like temporal, or they're material. They have these sorts of like material properties to them, things
Contingent.
like that, right?
Everything that you described
Right. But
there
I'm saying
is contingent.
there's more going on than contingent, right? There's other properties that they have.
Well, everything that you know, they are necessarily contingent by the way you define them, and then you're saying it's necessary. That doesn't make
Right. So
sense.
again, that just seems like there's a difference in like our prior commitments here, because I'm just not
No,
going to
no,
accept that, and
I
obviously
am
not.
reasoning mine out, and you're not giving a rebuttal, my friend.
What is the reasoning? You're just saying I've described things and those things are by definition contingent. I'm just saying I don't see
They
why that's the
they
case, because
do they change?
do they change?
Are they composite? Are they
Sure,
made up of parts? Anything made
sure.
up of parts requires a composer, therefore it can't be necessary.
I see. Why would that be true? Why
Because
believe that?
because unless the parts come together, it's not the thing is not what it is.
Right, but
until they were put
I'm saying
together.
it is
Therefore,
it
there must be
is.
something back of it that gives it this ability to be composed together. That's why ultimate reality, necessary being, must be simple.
Yeah, I'm just saying it is necessarily the case that this arrangement of, if you want to say it's a composition, that this composition obtains, right? And everything after that just sort of comes out of it. But that is what is necessary. That is what is like exists in all possible worlds. It is that. It is that like initial just state of the world.
But it's composed.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So then you're not referring to the thing itself, but you're referring to the parts that make it the thing that itself.
I'm referring to just a state of the world, sure.
Yes, but it has ontological status. And you're defining it as contingent and then wanting to say it's necessary.
I'm not defining it as contingent. I'm defining it as
No, you don't like
necessary.
the word, but that's the
Again, though,
okay. You have to make it make sense.
So this is going to go back to what I was talking about earlier, where we were talking about kind of the definitions of our modal terms, where again, you seem to be using a definition of contingent that is, I mean, you deny it, but it is like scholastic. It is not at all what you see in the contemporary literature around metaphysics. Contingency is closer to what I said, where it's something that is neither necessary nor impossible. It's something that exists in, some possible worlds. And that by itself, that bare definition of contingency is perfectly compatible with something that is composed. It has 500 parts, 2,000 parts, however many parts you want to give it, right?
But it has to be composed.
It is composed, sure, but it doesn't have to be composed by something.
Composed means brought together, okay? That's not necessary. That's contingent. I'm not using scholastic. I'm just using logic. This is just basic stuff.
I think we might have hit another impasse here. I don't think I'm like getting through to you when I say that, yes, this is just the one thing that exists in kind of every possible world. And yeah, sure, it has a bunch of parts out of which it is composed, but it is necessarily
not the thing itself,
in that
right?
arrangement.
So you need to look at the parts and justify those that make it the thing that it is, because what it is, it's something that was potentially what it is until it became actually when those parts are put together. Now you're wanting to look for something necessary behind the necessary, which means that the second necessary is not really necessary.
Okay. All right. I think we can. I mean, is there anything else that you'd want to talk about? I feel like that's the majority of the argument, right?
That's fine. Well, so the idea that let's go ahead and address, if you're okay with that, the idea that that's like what's his name, Alex Malpass. I spoke with him once on a video call, and I think he's at a point right now where he'll grant necessary being, but he'll say it's not personal, and that's what I think probably Graham Oppie might say something like that too as well. Do you? The problem with that is you and I are both personal. When I talk about personal nature, I'm talking about that which is teleological or that which is intentional. All right. So, for example, you and I both are seeking the salvation of existence. Every day that we wake up, we are seeking to save the phenomena of existence. That was what or Socrates would say, or or Plato. I mean, that you are seeking to every moment of our lives, we are trying to save the phenomena of existence. And for the atheist, it just means making life as long as it can, as happy as it can here on the earth. But we all have this goal in mind toward existence. And when we find something that is like, if you hold to like evolutionary biology, you see something new, you get all excited, you say, oh, this is new, this is better existence, or somehow like that. Now, so that is an example of teleology or intentionality, and also we're intending to have this conversation. So if you want to say that which gives rise to us is impersonal or unintentional, you've got to deal with that principle of proportionate causality that says that something cannot cause something and something else what it itself does not have the capacity for. So I'm making a case here for that necessary being also being personal or teleological or intentional, because you can't, let's say if the entire universe, let's look sometime in the past, let's say the entire universe is in this spin circle here, okay? And you say that sometime in the past, there was no intentionality. Whoever talked to me about Malpass, it must have been like the same day I talked to you or something, because it seemed like he was telling me intentionality, and this is what the evolutionists all say. I've been debating about 15 years with atheists, and they always say, "Oh, it's an emergent property, from matter." And the problem with that is if there was some time in the past when the entire universe, everything that exists, was unintentional, what would we have today? We would have unintentionality. But we are intending to have this conversation now. Therefore, there must be something eternally that is intentional. And what they want to say is, well, it's an emergent property, which is just sloppy magic talk saying that unintentionality intended intention, which is a violation of the law of identity again. So it doesn't make any sense at all. So there must be something eternally intentional if we have anything intentional or teleological or intentional today.
I mean, I guess on behalf of the physicalist here, they're just going to deny that there's things going on sort of ultimately that are not of the same sort that were happening before, humans came to exist. So they might say, at a certain level of description, you get like macroscopic enough. There is like intentionality of the sort you're describing. We form intentions about, going to work or whatever you said, perpetuating existence or something like that. But that those sorts of things are just supervening on the lower level processes, which are these just causal processes that are kind of exactly what's been going on, historically. I don't know how much I buy that view. I'm kind of undecided on philosophy of mind, to be honest with you, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad response that they could give you.
That I'm sorry, I didn't understand it.
So you're saying there has to be something kind of intentional in, in ultimate reality or whatever, in order for there to be like intentional things, produced as effects. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying the physicalist is going to deny that the kind of best description of what's going on, or, some kinds of physicalists, I should say, are going to deny that the best kind of description of what's going on when you have, intentional agents interacting with each other is at the level at which we're ascribing intentionality to them. So they might think that actually what's going on is you just have...
determinism, you're saying?
No, I don't know about determinism, but you have, physical causes and physical effects of the same sort that we have, in nature, in unintentional nature, right? And if you kind of zoom out far enough, you have what you can describe as, agents forming intentions and stuff like that. But all of this is kind of, this is the level that we're talking about when we talk about agents. And down here, what's actually going on, in like this kind of like privileged, like domain of discourse, right? You just have particles interacting with each other, or whatever you think the atheist thinks is going on.
But particles don't care about existence, right? Let me ask you this: do you think that rocks create philosophical societies?
No.
Okay, so there's an ontological difference between, say, humans and rocks. On that level.
On that,
because we're intentional. Because we care about existence. We care about what do you call it? Like conservation. We care about caring about the earth. We care about people suffering.
Yeah, sure. But I think you can accommodate that by saying the like domain of discourse in which we talk about, emotions or the formation of intentions or whatever is a kind of distinct domain of discourse from when we talk about, particles bumping into each other, and that you can't really give like a one-to-one correspondence or reduction of one to the other. So it seems weird to say that, we are just particles, bumping into each other, but you can kind of accommodate that almost like linguistically rather than, ontologically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you seem like you made my case.
No, because I still think there is. Well, okay, I guess I shouldn't say I think. Like I said, I'm kind of undecided. But on the sort of view I'm laying out here, there isn't kind of a distinct substance or something like that. It's still just, at base level, at the right level of description, there isn't anything kind of ontologically distinct from, rocks tumbling down a mountain or something.
Yes, but rocks tumbling down the mountain and children dying in an airplane are two very distinct things in hierarchical importance. We know it instinctively.
Yeah. So
my question is, How do you justify that? And the fact that they are different is an unbridgeable gap. I mean, in other words, rocks falling down a side, and children suffering will never
Right,
be the same.
but I am saying that the unbridgeableness of that gap, it need not be explained in terms of two distinct substances or something like that, fundamental ontological kinds.
Okay, but
You can
you're
explain it in terms of they are like the language that we use, um, just the discourse in which we describe rocks, falling down a mountain or whatever, is just completely distinct from when we attribute, emotions and like psychological states to people.
Mhm.
And that sort of is what the gap is that we use a particular vocabulary to over here and we don't use that vocabulary over here. And
Right.
you cannot provide like a one-to-one correspondence between them. Right.
right. And the rocks falling down this thing are just like material explanations, and children dying and suffering is much more than that. So it seems like you're making my case for me.
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry, I got
So I
distracted.
say just rocks falling down the side of a mountain are just material explanations of something, and children who are suffering is a completely different order of reality. And it seems like that's what I'm saying, and that's what you're saying, but you're saying you're disagreeing with me.
I am saying they're of the same ontological kind, right? And that's what you're disputing. So I don't see in one sense I'm making your point.
Okay, so why is it not okay for children to suffer?
Why is it not okay for children to suffer?
And to rocks can be broken up with impunity in your mind.
Because children.
So how are they the same thing?
I don't think I understand what you're even asking me. Because children are morally valuable, but rocks aren't necessarily.
Right, and that's what we're discussing here. So it's not just it's just not matter bouncing into each other. And somebody gives you an example, just saying, "Oh, it's just like anything else that we see," and no, it's quite different. And I'm saying it's intentional. There's teleology involved in the human life. Let's say, for example,
right, but
there's not teleology in rocks.
I'm saying that appearance
for that.
You can accommodate that sort of appearance without referring to there being a distinct substance or there being some sort of like teleology. So one example, if you're more on the like reductionist side, is you might say like all that's going on, that gives this appearance of like some distinct substance that's of a completely different kind, is that these microscopic sort of natural substances, physical substances or whatever, have arranged themselves in such a way that they're capable of like incredibly complex behavior.
Like what?
What do you mean?
Give me an example. I don't.
Okay, so like what I'm referring to is just like the brain, the human brain is it's able to have information inputted through the sensory modalities, and it's able to transform that information, and it's able to output certain kinds of behavior, and that is what for certain kinds of physicalists is just going to explain the appearance of like a totally distinct class of things, right? Uh-huh. It's just an incredibly complex sort of assemblage of the same sort of thing that rocks are composed out of.
Yeah, but rocks don't matter.
Right.
And you do.
Right, but
so they're not the same thing.
I don't exactly see how that entails that they're not the same thing. We can ascribe properties.
Can you ascribe value to rocks like you do to humans just because you say so?
You're saying, does that make them valuable if I say it's valuable?
Yeah, like radical nominalism or something.
I mean, it depends on your views on metaethics, I guess. I would say probably not. But I mean, there's certain circumstances I can imagine, I guess, where.
So we are determined to value. Would you say that as humans? And if somebody doesn't value, we say there's something wrong with them. They're like not bad, but they might be broken. Like somebody who wants to be suicidal or something.
Right.
Say, oh, let me help you. Your things are not good, but they will be good. I'll help you. So we are determined toward the sanctity of existence. And how does that determination instantiate non-teleologically? That's my question.
I think this is just going to depend on your view of metaethics, right?
Sure.
So are you asking?
And whose view is going to be more justified? And so that's what I'm saying.
I mean, according to the like current metaethical literature, the naturalistic view or the secular view, I mean,
It's a very stupid view. It's not reasonable.
Well, it is the majority
And just
view held by experts.
Do you know why philosophy is considered now to be a prerequisite for flipping burgers at McDonald's? It's Immanuel Kant's fault, in my opinion, because he took metaphysics off the table. Just throw that in there.
Right.
And it used to be philosophy was considered to be the highest of disciplines, and now if you get a degree in philosophy, what are you good for? Yeah, you can sell shoes, or you can work at McDonald's, or something, or teach, or
I mean,
professor.
You could
but I think it's because we've lost the ability to think. It actually started with Descartes. When actually started before that with voluntarism. But anyway, Descartes moved all reality inside here, and so we never know with idealism. We never know if the thing outside of us corresponds with the thing that we perceive in here. It used to be we started with everything outside, with particularly with realism, that we started with thing outside, and then we perceived it. So epistemology was secondary to ontology, but that's been flipped. Anyway, I'm going in on a rambling here.
Yeah,
I got to get going here. I got to go pick somebody
Okay.
up at the airport.
All right.
But I'm happy to talk again if you'd like to. You've been very kind and very thoughtful, and I think very reasonable with your.
Thanks.
Sometimes you get people and they'll start doing the filibuster of talk.
Yeah.
They start talking. It's like, what? And you didn't do that at all. I mean, you're just like, and I'm not saying, I very much enjoyed it. It was very helpful.
Okay.
Sure. And Sebastian, I appreciate your pushing the buttons there.
Yeah, thank you. Well. Thank you for coming and being a guest on the channel.
Talking.
And
what is your channel?
NaturalismNext. You can find the replay there, and you can re-upload it on your channel if you want.
Yeah, great.
And hopefully, I decided not to butt in at all because it seemed like you guys were doing fine. So hopefully that's all right.
Appreciate it. It's very nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you. And maybe we'll stay around and answer a few questions since we're live if anyone in the live chat wants to ask questions, but feel free to go and pick up.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good one. Have a good week.
All right. Take care. You too. Bye-bye. Bye. All right. Anyone post questions in the chat?
That was a lot. I feel like by about 30 minutes in, my brain just started like shutting down. My eyes kind of glazed over, but hopefully I was still like speaking coherently.
No, it's fine. I mean, it seemed pretty coherent the whole time.
Thanks, man.
It was fun to watch. I listened to most of it. I had to get up at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think one of the things that happened there was that I think Trey, this is the only thing I was gonna butt in and ask about the second point that you guys were on, was I think Trey is assuming a particular view in metaphysics, like act potency distinction, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't clear to me if he thought he was doing that or if he just thought there was some logical necessity to using those terms. But
yeah,
there's no reason why one thing you could have done is just denied that the act potency distinction was real, or that it applied to the scenarios you were talking about.
I think I only didn't because I don't know that much about just metaphysics in general, and so I feel like he was going to ask me what's your alternative account, and I kind of didn't want to do that. I was happy to just grant it because I still didn't think it mattered for the point he was making. But hold on, let's see. Hold on, I have chat open on my phone. Let's see what people are saying. How do you make your hair look so damn good? Thanks, man. Just air dry it, fucking part it after you get out of the shower, and then air dry, and then just put some product in when it's dry. What is Trey talking about? I don't know. I seem totally uninterested. Yeah, that's what I was saying. There was a point where I was like, I need to I want to go do something. I want to go outside. It's a beautiful day out.
Are you familiar, Lucas, with the idea that existence is univocal?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of bring that up. I wrote about that in a blog post for the blog a while back, because it was an argument against Anselm's ontological argument, that existence in the mind or the understanding and then existence in reality are actually real categories that we should be using. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't want to push that point because I kind of didn't want to get into it with him.
Yeah, I think it was the whole idea he was trying to push that basically if you have an infinite chain, you're gonna have something come from nothing, so to speak, because like there's always something potential that needs to be actualized that doesn't really
Sure.
exist. If you just assume like eternalism and that existence is univocal, the problem kind of dissipates, I think.
Yeah. Hopefully, I saw. I'm like looking back through the chat, Ladouche, and I see you're saying I should like tell him I don't accept his metaphysics. Hopefully, I made that clear enough. Because I was thinking about that too. That a lot of the times I would give a response and he would go on a tangent where he'd use like he'd talk about like perfection and all of these sort of Aristotelian or like Thomistic concepts, and I kept trying to be like as far as we're concerned, we've only talked about contingency, and I can accept contingency without talking about any of this other stuff. But I feel like I let it slide a little more than I should have. But okay, let's see. This argument, distinction between rock and a human, was just a composition fallacy. Yeah, maybe. But the whole problem saying there potential at time t1 and actual time t2.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking is like I didn't really understand even granting the distinction, the idea that like at some point you don't have anything. Like surely the future chicken is potential at the time that it doesn't yet exist, but at that time there is an actual.
I didn't know. I couldn't like diagnose what the impasse was there. Like I felt like I was explaining it, and then he kept just going, no, but it has to come from zero, and I just kept being like, but it's an infinite series, so why does it have to come from like zero? And he just kept repeating it, and I didn't know like what part of it he wasn't getting. So I just sort of moved on, but yeah.
I don't really entirely follow that part either.
Joseph, you're probably right. And I feel like I was butchering the Phil Mind section of that. I feel like that's when I started to like tune out.
But that part I wasn't paying as much attention to.
Yeah, no, I was kind of checked out, and I was trying to like, I was bouncing between different views. I feel like I was a little sloppy there, but
should have said you were a physicalist. What the hell?
I think what I kept saying is I was not sure, but I was sort of talking on behalf of the physicalist, which that's about what I do normally. That's about where I am. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too much. Infinite series are self-contradictory, William Lane Craig style. Yeah, I was also waiting for him to make some sort of objection, about why an infinite series was impossible, kind of along the way that William Lane Craig does. Like I was waiting for the paradoxes to come up or something like that, but he just never like did. People can't be the same thing as rocks. Yeah, I didn't understand his argument either. He's like, are rocks valuable? Like, no. Are people valuable? Yes. Okay, so they're different. It's like, I mean, yes, they're not the same thing, but they're different. Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably should have made that more clear. Oh man. That's true. I never made him explain modal semantics. To be fair, he wasn't the one that I asked to explain modal semantics, but also that feels mean because I know he can't. Like I feel like that's just like a shrap. But I wasn't trying to do gotchas if I could help it, because he did just give me an hour of his time, but yeah, I don't think he knows anything about modal semantics. I don't know if he's read anything that was written past the year 1400. All right. Anyone have any other like questions?
Any final questions? Or else we will go off live.
Oh yeah.
Final question for Lucas. When are you gonna start posting anything on any place or location? I'm publicly calling you out to post one article or one video in the year 2025 on the Naturalism Next.
I don't know, dude. I only have like 8 months. I don't know.
That's a long amount of time.
I can't write anything in 8 months.
You can. The problem is you write it and then you like just put it in your docs and you just revise it like 80 times and you decide you want to post.
That is exactly what happens. I write it and then I look at it 2 weeks later and I'm like, I had no idea what I was talking about, and then I don't post it because I feel like it's a bad post. So I have about 30 of those in my Google Docs. But
yeah, start posting that.
Yeah,
doesn't matter if it's bad.
That's true. That is true. I guess I should be real. I've been undergrad. I'm not going to make anything that's like good, but I can make a post that's like worth posting. Yeah. Hold on, people are responding to me on Twitter. Yeah, you cannot grasp an infinite causal chain with no beginning. So damn true. Why not a physicalist anymore? Oh, I'm. It's not that I'm like not a physicalist, or I think I'm more to just like agnostic. Or there's so many like branches of physicalism that I'm not sure like which one I even agree with, and so it's hard to even like defend physicalism without saying anything more specific than like I'm a physicalist. Like you kind of need an account in order to argue for it. Question to both of you. You think the first cause of the universe could have several parts?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess so. That's what I was trying to argue with Trey. For people in the chat who have read Oppie more recently, that I do find it like was I faithful to Oppie? I feel like I like butchered it kind of because it's been so long since I've read him, but
No one's read Oppie recently, let's be honest.
that's true. That's true.
Everyone read him like 5 years ago, and then we just
when Phil Rail was
his
big.
arguments.
That is true. That is exactly true.
I have like it's probably one of the books I have the most amount of notes on, because when I first read it, it was like one of the first Phil Rail books I read, and so I took really detailed notes. So I could go back and Ledouche says he thinks you said nothing incorrect, and Richard said you were fair. Yeah, I think you were fine on representing Oppie. I mean,
just not nuance. Yeah, I didn't get too technical, but maybe I should. Maybe that would have been, if I could do it again. Maybe I should have just talked to him like he knew what he was talking about, and then just spent the entire time explaining stuff as he was sort of trying to do to me. But you know what I never did? I never ran a modal ontological argument. That was like half my plan, as because he was trying to own me on like atheists can't account for modality, and I was going to run like a reverse modal ontological argument, but I guess it died in my document. Shit. I wasn't super proactive in the discussion. That's true. He did soapbox a lot. I feel like he went on a lot of tangents, and I kind of just let him yap. And I guess you're right. That made him. He got away with a lot of shit because of that.
That's just like something you learn by doing a bunch of debates, to be honest.
I will say this is my first ever public debate, so I was pretty nervous, but a friend of mine put together an ontological argument. Dude, hit me with that shit. Joseph says Joseph said he liked when I said I'm talking about chickens. Real. That was fun.
That was hilarious. That was the best one. That was my favorite one.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like a dumber man.
It's good practice for your life. Having gone through like interviews and stuff for graduate school and that sort of thing, I feel like public speaking is good to do. I mean, I don't believe in this, like, since we're just sitting here talking, the whole like, I don't believe in debate culture. Like, I think it's bullshit that debates lead to anything productive or like are a better form of communication than writing. Like, I think writing is infinitely superior. Mm-hmm. And debates are basically for people who want to make like rhetorical points, because realistically, it's more about whether you can like think quickly and on your feet. And I'm saying this as someone who's like generally regarded as fairly decent at debating. I don't think it's a good method for truth. I think it's a good method for rhetoric and, convincing people, which is important for certain domains. I think but on the other hand, I think that it's good to practice it and get good at like speaking publicly, because it will just serve you well in your life to have that skill. And it is good to like, it probably does to some degree contribute to thinking, to be able to think on your feet.
Yeah, so I think I agree entirely. That's why I almost that's why I was so hesitant to just accept to do the debate. Like, that's why I've never done one of these before. It's because every time I watch one on YouTube or whatever, I'm like, this is completely unproductive. And normally it just comes down to just people presenting the arguments that are just already existing in the literature and then responding with the pre-made arguments against it. And it's just like, just read the book and you've gotten way more out of it than you could have out of the debate. But
right.
I don't know. I went for it because he was harassing me on Twitter, and I was like, all right, let me just talk to him. I'll talk to Trey.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say bye to everyone. Lucas, you can stay on if you want for.
I'll probably head out.
Yeah. Well, I'll end the stream and it will like kick us both out, or it won't kick us
Okay.
both out. We'll still be here, but the stream will end.
Got
So bye, live people. Thanks for sticking around for the discussion. End stream.